Well, I think following fairly close on the heels of that was the idea of orthodoxy. If there's anything Protestants know, it's that they disagree with most other Protestants, right? There's this unbelievable range of beliefs that you can have as a Protestant and still be considered biblical. Now, certain Protestants may say that your view is wrong, but it's always going to boil down to some problem with your interpretation. It's not going to be because, you're part of a cult or something necessarily.
Yeah. What are some of these doctrinal differences?
Oh gosh, you name it. I actually have an entire shelf back here that is nothing but books written by Protestant scholars, faithful Protestant scholars, arguing with each other on different topics. There's actually 2 different publishers that publish these kinds of books. There's over 50 of them right now. There's almost nothing that, other than just basic, God exists, kinds of things that Protestants don't disagree on. I mean, they disagree on a wide range of ethical issues. They disagree on pretty much all of the sacraments, how they work, whether or not they're sacraments would be another one. Even justification itself. I mean, this is the doctrine that basically launched the Protestant Reformation. And you've got numerous views on justification. How do you get it? What does it mean? What is faith? What is faith and works? How do they work together? As a Protestant, you're free to disagree on virtually any of these teachings. And yet there's certain teachings that you're not allowed to disagree on. So for example, if you say, well, I'm not sure God's a Trinity, well, then most Protestants would say, okay, well, then you're not a Christian. Like you're out. You have to believe in the Trinity. Even if you disagree with a million things about the Trinity, you have to at least acknowledge the Trinity.
Who came up with that criteria?
Yeah, right. Well, that is pretty much the question, right? Because one of the things that we learned a lot about at SES when we're learning apologetics is how to treat groups that we disagree with, because certain groups just need to be reasoned with. Okay, let's sit down and talk about why, a woman can't marry a woman. All right. Talking to like a liberal Methodist or something. But then there's some people that need to be evangelized. Like, you're not just wrong. You don't just have some confusion on an issue. You're like not a Christian at all. You're on your way to hell if you keep believing this stuff, and you need to be evangelized. You need to turn into a Christian. So this would be somebody like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, people like that. So these are people that are claiming to some degree to be Christian or to believe the Bible or that sort of thing, the same kind of claims that we would make. But they're so far off on certain key issues that they just can't even be considered Christian at all. And that brought up, that question, like, where did this idea of essential Christian teachings versus non-essential Christian teachings come from? Because again, if you're Sola Scriptura Protestant, everything about your faith is supposed to be able to be found in the Bible. And the Bible nowhere says, oh, by the way, this is an essential doctrine, but this one isn't. It just teaches you the truth, and you either believe it or you don't. But it's not like they're color coded. There's not like little footnotes or font changes or anything like that. When it says, okay, this is an essential issue, this is a make or break issue right here, but this one over here isn't.
Yeah, it's a big issue to have.
Yeah, right. Because we have to figure out who's a Christian and who isn't. Like, how do you react to people who disagree with you if you don't know if they're even like really a Christian or not? Yeah. And so once again, most of the answers, in fact, I think Norman Geisler came out with probably the best try from a Protestant view of identifying the difference between an essential and a non-essential. He said it had to do with the gospel. Basically, look, anything that you have to believe in order to get to heaven, that's got to be an essential, right? And anything that you can disagree on and still get to heaven, we'll call that a non-essential. And he had this whole logical thing that he worked out. I mean, he wrote magazine articles. He wrote published an entire book, published another book later. All of it was basically this idea of determining orthodoxy. That's what I think of it as. What makes you orthodox versus non-orthodox? The interesting thing is that every time Geisler published a list of these essentials, they didn't match.
Oh my gosh.
So it wasn't just that Dr. Geisler disagreed with other Christians about what the essentials were or how to discover them, which he did, but that's Protestantism, no big deal there. He never even came up with the same list twice himself using his method. which again, to this day, I still think is the best method out there that Protestants have for figuring out the difference between essentials and non-essentials. And yet he didn't even have his list match. And there were numerous other problems with it that I, eventually discovered. But again, it's this idea that we can take what we already know and reverse engineer it, derive principles that create our list, and then apply them to other things. It just ends up being a circular argument over and over again. And again, Protestants have a big problem with this, because every time they come up with a principle, it ends up including things that they don't want or excluding things that they do want. Mm-hmm. And I found myself just continually coming back to the creeds. It's if anything in the entire church counts as a standard of orthodoxy, I mean, it's got to be like the Nicene Creed, right? And then I looked at my history, and guess what I found out? There's the church again.
Yeah, like the Catholic Church, to the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, they come up with, hammering it out, some of the core doctrinal beliefs. But how do you get a council with a creed that's authoritative like that within Protestantism when everybody's disagreeing amongst each other?
Yeah, and so you get back to this idea that, at some point in history, you can draw the line and say, okay, from this point forward, the church became, either unrecognizable or at least untrustworthy. But if you go back to the canon, if you go back to the standard of Christian orthodoxy, the Nicene Creed, you're already so far advanced into things that Protestants don't like that you've still got the same problem you had when you started. And once again, trying to logically, abstractly work out, why a Mormon is not a Christian and why their beliefs are damnable, whereas, somebody on like the far liberal or far right side of what is considered Orthodox Christianity, they might be horribly wrong, but it's not going to affect their salvation. And trying to take Sola Scriptura seriously, I realized I'm not able to answer this. I'm not able to show you from the Bible why these beliefs count as orthodox and others aren't that important.